After months of debate, 25 players have been named to represent Team Canada at the Sochi Olympics. And for insight into the selections, we bring in Stephen Brunt, who joins us today from our Sportsnet studios in Toronto. Now, Stephen, I'll start with, what's the identity of this team?
Well, I think the identity is going to have to be found very quickly once they get to Sochi. So it's an all-star team, like all-star teams. It's going to come together at the last minute. But I think in general, what Steve Yzerman and company were looking for was a team that could handle the big ice on a European ice surface, that could handle being in a strange environment, not a North American environment, not an NHL environment, and players that could be stars on their own teams in the NHL, but on an Olympic team would be willing to play a role, a third-line role, a fourth-line role, a penalty-killing role, maybe things they don't do in the NHL every night, but would be willing to do and would be capable of doing for an Olympic team.
All right, well, speaking of those roles and those players, were you surprised by any of the selections or the omissions?
I think there's a couple of, well, I guess, you could have a whole other roster of Canadian players and would be pretty darn good. There are that many, the depth of talent is that great that there are going to be players left off this team who deserve to be there, who could be there, and who could win a gold medal for Canada. But I think the ones that jumped out for a lot of people were, the fact that Joe Thornton's not there, who's having a terrific year and has played for Canada internationally before. And I think really especially Martin St. Louis, who has had a great year for Tampa and plays for Steve Yzerman. It's Steve Yzerman's team. And it had to be a very tricky, difficult conversation for Steve Yzerman to go to Martin St. Louis, a veteran player in the NHL, a guy who, this is his last shot at an Olympic Games, and say to him, I'm sorry, Martin, you're not going to go. But that said, somebody can get hurt. Somebody could be off this roster. We don't know if Steven Stamkos is going to play. So, maybe there's a way that a St. Louis or maybe even a Thornton gets on this team before they go to Sochi.
Yeah, obviously a lot of depth there with guys like that being omitted. Can you draw any comparisons between, this team and the team that won gold in 2010?
There's a lot of crossover. There are a lot of similarities. It's young. They've injected some youth into this team. I think they learned that lesson back in 2006 with the Turin team that did not win a medal, that you can't just go back to the guys that won it for you the last time, that 4 years is a long time in hockey. So there's been an injection of youth, but we're going to be talking about Sidney Crosby. We're going to be talking about Roberto Luongo. We're going to be talking about some guys who we talked about a lot in Vancouver. I think the biggest thing here, this is the 5th Olympics with Olympic players. 4 times. We've had two times Canada won the gold medal in Salt Lake and in Vancouver, Olympic rinks, North America, or NHL-style rinks, North America. 2 times they didn't win a medal, Nagano and Turin. So we're in one of those European situations now. We're in a different place, and Canada has not done anything with NHL players on a European ice surface. So that's the real big challenge going into Sochi.
Just quickly, looking at these 25 guys, which players do you think need to step it up the most?
Well, we always talk about goaltending, and I think if it's not going to be Roberto Luongo, a lot of people think he's the guy starting out, then you're going to be talking about Carey Price. I know in Montreal you talk about Carey Price all the time, but you need a number 1 goaltender. Somebody will win that job in this tournament, either Luongo or Price. I don't think it'll be Mike Smith. And so I think we could be talking about Carey Price before this tournament's done.
All right, thanks for your insight on all this, and we'll see you next week.